No one in the Trump administration is willing to admit that he or she gave the order to fire tear gas across the southern border into Mexico yesterday, something the United States has never done before. Mexico is demanding an investigation of this violation of their sovereignty. The Secretary of Homeland Security issued a written statement about the situation in which she did not even dare to mention tear gas. That was also true of the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, who also would not dare mention tear gas in his statement about what happened. But finally tonight, the first and only member of the Trump administration to mention the use of tear gas at the southern border said this.
Why is a parent running up into an area where they know the tear gas is forming and it's going to be formed, and they're running up with a child?
The president is, of course, lying. As this photograph shows, that is Maria Lila Mesa Castro and her two twin daughters running away from the tear gas, which they had no idea was coming because the United States has never fired tear gas into Mexico before. That tear gas canister is in Mexico. Those people are in Mexico. That child's bare feet are in Mexico, running away from Donald Trump's tear gas. Today's Gallup poll shows President Trump's disapproval is at an all-time high of 60%. That poll comes after weeks of President Trump trying to demonize families like the Castros, who we just saw headed toward our southern border. Tonight, we know that the president thinks that using tear gas on children looks bad. There is no reason to assume that Donald Trump actually believes that it is bad to use tear gas on children, but he obviously believes that most people think using tear gas on children is bad. And so the president decided to do what he always does in a situation like this. He simply lied about it.
We don't use it.
Of course they did. President Donald Trump is, of course, lying, which comes as no surprise. He has been labeled a pathological liar in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and now he is a pathological liar who uses tear gas on children. Joining us now, Maria Teresa Kumar, the president and CEO of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor, and Ron Klain is back with us. And Maria Teresa, your reaction to the president's realization that most people think that it is atrocious, unthinkable to use tear gas on children. And we know that the president knows that because he's denying that he did it.
Right. Well, he saw the poll numbers this morning, probably saw something that even Fox News was not in agreement, and all of a sudden he decided to pivot. But let's be clear, what the president did yesterday at the southern border, basically throwing tear gas at families seeking asylum, was his way of finding a loophole after a federal judge last week said that anybody who crosses the border has the right to seek asylum by international law, by American law. So the president decided to close the border to ensure that these families seeking asylum did not put a step forward on our ground. And it really takes a moment for us as Americans to really try to reconcile what we're witnessing, because we are the moral authority when it comes to refugees and asylum. And that picture that is now circulating around the world all of a sudden jeopardizes not just ethnic minorities in this country and people seeking asylum here, but it sends messages to authoritarian regimes that their ethnic minorities are vulnerable and up for option. And that is incredibly frightening, Lawrence.
Ron Klain, there is a simple question to which perhaps only the Democrats in Congress next year can find the answer, and that is, who gave the order? The Secretary of Homeland Security refuses to even mention the use of tear gas, and no one down the line in the Trump administration will even mention the use of tear gas.
Lawrence, that's right, and it is an important question, but in some ways it's buried inside the bigger question, which is, no matter who gave the order, Donald Trump created the crisis in which the order was given. Right. He, as Maria Teresa said, he is disobeying the law by denying these people. Let's keep in mind, these people are not coming here unlawfully. They're coming here lawfully to seek asylum under U.S. law in the way that both our laws and now a court has said is completely lawful. The person acting unlawfully here is the president and his administration, who are trying to prevent people from exercising their legal rights. Donald Trump likes to talk all the time about law and order and obeying the law and so on and so forth. Well, he is breaking the law here. And whether it is keeping minors detained unlawfully away from their parents or firing tear gas at them or whatever, it matters a little less to me, Lawrence, who actually pushed the final button on firing that tear gas, and more that Donald Trump has set up the situation where our government is acting lawlessly towards innocent people who are trying to exercise their rights. And I think it's somewhat reassuring, frankly, that the American people are rejecting this. They're saying they don't like it, they can't tolerate it. Donald Trump has to be held to account for it.
And Maria Teresa, the Castros, the family, and I'd like to get that picture back up if we can, that was running away from the tear gas. They walked there from Honduras. This is a family that has been walking all the way up from Honduras, and by the time they get here, the little girl on the left side of that photograph has no shoes. Whether she had shoes when she started, we don't know. But this is a family that represents absolutely no threat to the United States of America. This is a family that does not need to have tear gas fired on it. And it's also a family that has every legal right to approach our border at any point on our border and ask for entry via asylum or any other request of entry that they want to make.
That is exactly right, Lawrence. And I want to put mothers and fathers watching your show tonight in a position of a parent who has to uproot their lives completely to save their child. That is the desperation that people fleeing Honduras specifically are facing. They have two options: one, to stay there and have their child either thrown into prostitution or basically become a gang member or possibly killed, or come north to the land of freedom that was built by the love and sacrifice and aspirations of refugees and immigrants. Let us not forget, we are the wealthiest nation in this country. We are the ones that built that American identity is built on sacrifice of those refugees and those immigrants. That is who we are. And right now we are shutting the door, not only against that child and that mother, but also against who we are fundamentally as Americans.
And Ron Klain, we know that the president approves of everything that we saw happen on the southern border yesterday, every unprecedented action taken by the American enforcement on the American side of that border, because this is exactly what he said he wants to see happen.
Yeah, and look, and he's in Mississippi tonight bragging about the various immigration actions he's taken, trying to drag a candidate with a horrible record across the line in the Mississippi Senate runoff. He thinks this is good politics for him, and he thinks this rallies his base. And most importantly, he thinks it distracts us from how he's failing his job as president. You know, today, 15,000 Americans lost their jobs because of Donald Trump's failed trade policies and GM shutting down major plants in the heartland of the country. That's political death for Donald Trump. And so he'd rather talk about anything but that. So he wants to, tell us that this caravan is still coming and we should be scared and nervous about that, instead of talking about how his policies are failing Americans and failing to create the kind of jobs he promised he'd create.
Ron Klain and Maria Teresa Kumar, thank you both for joining us tonight. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.